They'll be required. Let's talk about what that is actually. The role of the chair, as I see it, and I've been the chair of the local works committee, I was a student senator in college, I've been a chair for many committees. The role of the chair often isn't to push an agenda. In my case, I won't do that a lot. I'm really going to try and foment ideas from the group and push things along and make sure we're staying on track for timelines, making sure that things don't get forgotten. So my role is going to be to track people down if they're not showing up, to keep an eye on membership. The secretary's role isn't to do those things, which it is in many other committees. The reason I bring that up is because lots of people don't want to be a secretary. It scares them. It's so much work because then you have to take care of all of these little things, and chairs will often just dump, oh yeah, you're the secretary, you go ahead and do all this stuff. That's not how I run things. My responsibility is to keep track of people. My responsibility is to make sure the agendas get out and emailed, to make sure that everything gets put together. The secretary's responsibility is to record the minutes and publish them to the group via email. That's it.
And also to the city clerk, and as well as the planning department.
And that email simply includes their, it's just adding 2 more emails. So I want to stress that it's not that complicated because we need someone to be the secretary. Desperately. In fact, we can't exist without it. So, without further ado, who steps forward? I have been the secretary of the EDIC. I found it invaluable to have a laptop.
Yeah, I thought you might think that. I type pretty fast, but I'm just coming off of some committees that I won't discuss here.
Are they that bad?
The thing, yeah, possibly. The thing that really makes me hesitate is simply that I am overtaxed. I am way stretched thin. I should probably not be on any of the things that I'm doing. I'm just that invested. And so my big reluctance is just when it comes to, I can make meetings on time. Everything else, it's really sketchy when I can manage to squeeze it in. I've literally had a week of days where I arrive at work. I work at Hampshire College. And though I'm but a lowly staffer, I have days where I literally arrive, begin a conversation that then it's like a relay race. The next person is standing there while the first person is finishing, and 3 days later I might stop talking and having meetings. So that's my primary hesitation.
Okay. So it seems your interest is there. It's about time.
I can type fast.
Which is
on the laptop.
A good thing. In your limited biographies, you seemed incredibly organized and detailed to me from what you were saying.
I get that impression, but I'm actually not.
Everyone's taking one step back.
If I can, I don't have a laptop, and I would offer to do it if I felt like I could capture most of, if I felt like I could do it and be in the meeting.
I happen to have an extra laptop.
I mean, I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Kurt,
I know that I can't go home.
It doesn't have to be a word for word. It just really has to be a summary of the essence of the meeting. It doesn't have to be a word for word documentation.
And it seems like we may have some emergency backups here if you're absent.
Yeah, I'll trade off. Do you want to do it on a rotating basis?
I prefer that we keep it.
probably
Yes.
consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
But backups.
Until I burn out and then somebody else
Fair indeed.
steps up.
The things that we care about really, and we won't worry too much about it this meeting, but going forward is that you just kind of record the sense of the conversation that goes forward, and if anyone makes a motion, you record who made the motion, who made the second, and how many votes. That's all.
And who attended the meeting.
I already have a template in Word that I can give you that's just plug and play kind of stuff, so I'll email that to you.
Okay.
Congratulations. All right.
Do you need to vote on it or no?
I think we should.
Being that formal?
Yeah. Do we have a motion to nominate?
I make a motion to nominate Kurt.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All against? All right, let the no one recording a record say.
It was unanimous.
Did I hear, you voted too, I didn't quite see. Okay, good, all in favor. It's 6-0. Let's see if I can't come up with a temporary minutes. Okay, we're really through the dirty stuff, and now we can kind of get to the meat of what we're here to do, which pleases me. I'd like to give Jessica a chance to brief us.
Sure. Well, 3 of the members here were part of the process, so this is more of a briefing for the 2. You weren't part of the process either, so for the 3 of you who did not participate and just understand how it all happened. So it was about an 18-month process. We had 40 members on a master plan committee. The committee was broken into subcommittees. Each of the subcommittees worked on a specific topic. My role was not to write the plan. All of that burden was put on the subcommittees to write the chapters, to come up with the strategies, to prioritize the strategies. So it really was a community-driven plan. The first half of the process was all public outreach, so we did a community-wide survey. We had a 42%, I think, response rate, which is incredibly high for surveys in general. Most of the time you're getting 20% below, so to have that response rate was incredible. We also did a 2-day visioning workshop. We also held a series of talks on different topics. So each subcommittee selected a speaker. We held an open forum for the speaker to talk about very specific topics, whether it was affordable housing, historic preservation, economic development. And so we did a lot of outreach. And Stuart, who was the former city planner, and I spent a lot of time helping each of the subcommittees and providing them with information and bouncing ideas back and forth with them and providing them with here are the tools that are sort of out there in the trade right now, here are some things for you to think about. But the committees really did a lot of the hemming and hawing on what made sense to them. So you'll see in the back of the plan is this matrix, and this is really the implementation chapter. 206. Page 206. Now I have to apologize in advance. My copy is already falling apart and the pages are already falling out, so we may end up having to do some sort of binding issue once you start really utilizing these plans, because the pages may fall out.
Can I ask real quickly?
Yeah.
Because we have the PDF online, is it possible we might possibly be able to move to a digital document?
There is a digital document if you prefer to work in that. It's right on the home page. You can just download it. Where was I going? Okay, so this implementation chapter is basically organized by topic. So starting with the first, you'll see that these are the housing. These are all the different housing strategies that were in there, and we've sort of laid it out so it's kind of an easy to read format. And this is the chapter. This is the priority ranking that each of these subcommittees provided for these strategies.
This is consistent with the order in which the chapters are presented.
Correct. Yep. This is the type. Is it regulatory? Is it non-regulatory? Who the subcommittee identified as the responsible party to make the strategy happen. And then there was some set target dates. Now you'll see a lot of these target dates have already expired. So that's going to be one aspect of your job, is to be going through this chapter and possibly trying to reset new target dates that are more realistic. With some of the later master plans that I've worked on in my prior job, we set it more as a immediate, high priority, medium priority, low priority, and then set a range of years, because to have these very specific dates sometimes can be difficult to sort of hit. So that's going to be one task that you're going to be looking at, is basically looking at this and updating it with new target dates that make sense. The other section of the plan that I'd like to highlight to you is in the beginning on page 8 and 9. There's the top 25 strategies. There are about, I don't even know, over 200 strategies total in this plan, and some of them are duplicative. But what this did, we had a very intense, and I don't know if you remember this really intense night that we had with the stickers and the dots, and what we basically did is every person got to, I don't remember if it was every person, every committee got to nominate 2 strategies that they felt was the most important out of this entire plan, but it couldn't be from the own chapter that they worked on. So they had to read all the other strategies and try to nominate something that was outside of what they've been focusing on for a good period of time. These all went up on big sheets of paper. We gave everybody stickers. It was a weighted system. You know, red was a higher priority, yellow was a second priority, green was a third priority. People put dots on the strategy they thought was the most important. And from that weighted system of dots, we came up with this top 25. So it was really sort of measured system of how it was done. We then took the top 25, and then We sat down with the executive committee, which was made up of a member of each of the subcommittees, and reviewed how the weighted system came out. If there were ties, we decided which one came first. So this list of top 25 was a really intense process to get to this. It took 2 hours to get to this list, essentially. But it was probably one of the most fun nights of the whole project, I thought.
That's really quick, actually.
So what I did is I went through this list this afternoon, and I basically did a type up of where are we at under each of these strategies. So if you wouldn't mind, would it be okay to go through all 25 just to give a summary?
All I can say is thank you.
Okay. Now, some of this might be jargony. Some of it's very planning tech language. If there's anything at all that you ever need clarification on, any program, any term, do not hesitate to email me or call me and say, I need more explanation of what this program is or what this is, and I can either direct you to a website that will give you lots and lots of information, or I can give you, like a 5 to 10 minute summary over the phone of this is essentially what this program does and this is what it is. So you're going to be running into things you're probably not familiar with at all, and that's okay. I'm here to help on that, so just let me know when you need assistance on that. And if anytime you're coming along in your process and you want me to present to the committee on a specific topic or program, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know and I can give a presentation to everybody. So let me just run through this very quickly. So adopt a Chapter 40R Smart Growth District. This is a very specific zoning tool that was developed by the Department of Housing and Community Development. The city adopted it in 2010. We have we have two sub-districts. Those are them right there.
In green.
The green and the blue. The blue is our downtown district, mixed-use district, and then the green is our traditional neighborhood village district. The zoning bylaw that's associated with these zoning districts is in the current zoning, which is online. Essentially, what this program does is it's an optional zoning program. A landowner can utilize building at a higher density than what's permitted with the underlying zoning. They have to provide affordable housing. And the carrot to the applicant is that it's a site plan review by right process, so they can't be denied. As long as they follow all of the guidelines that have been set out by the city in terms of design standards, they get approved. So we have one project that has moved forward in the city at this point, 15 Cottage Street, right over here across from the pond. They went through this permitting process and they've been approved under this program. There have been some recent discussions by the planning board, and Jim probably is aware of this. I believe you're at the meeting. We had representatives from the Southampton Planning Board who are interested in possibly expanding our 40R districts to include on the boundary of Southampton and Easthampton. Basically being able to utilize the land on the Easthampton side to build housing and using the services on the Southampton side with a big Y. As part of the program is you have to be able to walk to goods and services within a half mile of the housing district. So it was a district that had been talked about during the 40R process locally, but we threw it out because it wasn't going to work. So that's something to chew on and to think about as a possible project for the future, is expanding the 40R to include this Southampton area, and there's interest on the Southampton side. Any questions on that? Did that give the nuts and bolts? Are you overwhelmed already? Okay.
I guess I'm in the wrong place.
What are you looking for?
Are you looking for the Sped Pack meeting?
I think.
I saw someone earlier and she said that it wasn't going to be here.
Oh, okay.
So.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good luck. Number two, the rail trail. We had talked about expanding to Northampton, Southampton, Nonotuck Park, the schools and other community facilities. It's happened to Northampton. We have the extension to Northampton. We have the extension to Southampton, but the other ones are not complete as of yet. So this is sort of a partially complete strategy.
I just want to be absolutely clear. What are the other ones? What are we talking about?
Nonotuck Park, the schools.
Nonotuck Park. The schools and other community facilities. So trying to connect to, White Brook Middle School, or figuring ways to connect
Put that
civic.
into the line.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
got it.
So it doesn't have to necessarily be a rail trail, but maybe it's some sort of pathways or extensions
Yeah, that's
to be
what
able to
threw me
access.
off.
Yeah, okay.
As I recall, it's about the walkability and...
Exactly.
Yep. Hire housing and economic development professional. The assistant planner that was hired this year, part of his responsibilities is to be an economic development person. So why we don't have a person who is completely dedicated to economic development, we do have, under our current budget climate, somebody who's fulfilling that role, and I also do, Ben is, yeah, and then I also do some economic development stuff as well. So together we are sort of doing that. The website, I believe, Jim, you updated the website during the master plan process. There was discussions about having an interactive master plan. That's never happened, to my knowledge. The strategy regarding smart growth and sustainable development, this to me is sort of an ongoing, this isn't something specific, but something we just should be keeping in our minds as we're moving forward. The Energy Commission, a lot of these programs that you'll see that identified in the energy chapter have already have been done by the city, have been completed. We had an energy committee for a while. It's no longer functioning. So that's something that would be really important to get up and running. We have a mayor who's very knowledgeable regarding energy and energy consumption. And my fear is when he is no longer serving as our mayor, we don't have a body in the government that really knows this stuff backwards and forwards like he does. So to me, this seems like a really important strategy to move forward, is trying to get an energy committee up and running. We have been designated as a green community. This is a state program. There's about 5 criteria that you have to hit in order to get designated. We've gone through all of that, and I can provide you to the website that gives you all the details about green communities if you so choose. The green building codes. This is one I think is a hard one, just in terms of market conditions, because building green can be expensive. And so you need to have the right developer who's willing to put the money and the energy to go through an official certification process. In my opinion, I think there's other ways to go around with green building rather than forcing people to get certification, but this is going to be up to you guys to decide. But on a side note, we do have what's called a stretch code. It's something that is a stretch of our building code that requires any new building to be, residential building to be built at a higher energy efficiency. This was adopted as part of that Green Communities designation. So while it doesn't completely serve that green building component, it definitely touches on it to some extent. The other thing is the planning board is going to be hearing from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Prior to my working here, PVPC was working with the previous city planner and the planning board to develop what's green development standards. This has some green building components in it, so this may or may not move forward, and it may be something that the committee would want to take an interest in. The highway business, as Jason very much knows, there's a highway business subcommittee that's working under the planning board right now, and Wendy too.
Wendy too, right?
So they're working to address design standards, look at pedestrian and bike amenities and design standards, and so end of the calendar year, we're expecting to have a final report from the committee. So this may be a strategy you want to hold off on until something comes from the committee for further review.
Sounds logical.
The wellhead protection plan, not to my knowledge has there been a wellhead protection plan developed, but that might be something worth checking with DPW on. Number 10, the core habitat map. I do not know of that happening at all, so in my opinion there's probably no action happening on that. The school renovations, updates, and new construction. We have a new high school that's being built. So this is, to me, this is sort of one of those ongoing strategies. Parcels for affordable housing. We are in the process right now of developing a housing production plan, and one of the components of that plan is trying to identify areas for affordable housing. There's not a ton of city-owned properties, but we can certainly try to go through some analysis for you. But we are moving ahead on 2 projects on city-owned parcels. One is the East Street parcel that was part of a Community Preservation Act funding. And then the other one is on the Everett Street, 154 Everett Street, and those are units going to be built by Habitat for Humanity. So those are moving forward. The affordable housing for artists, there hasn't been anything formally adopted in the city for creating affordable housing specifically for artists, so that could be something worth checking into and looking at. The school buildings, inspect and evaluate each school building for possible reuse, demolition, and sale. I would guess that it would be best to probably check with the school building committee on whether an inventory has been done or not. I am not aware of what's been accomplished. Land acquisition for open space, that's sort of an ongoing thing that's continuing in the city, but something certainly worth looking at. And then also educational campaign, to my knowledge, has not really been completed. There are, we have our local land trust that is working on campaigning and getting people to recognize open space, but in terms of a city education campaign, I'm not aware of one really happening.
I know there's going to be a meeting in my neighborhood this Sunday about the land off of land on Glendale that I believe the Piscataway Trust has the right of first refusal, so it's fundraising for that. I live over there, so.
Okay. Bike ped on Route 10. I think this is a worthy thing to strive for, but it's going to be something that's hard to implement because it's a road that's it's a Mass DOT ownership, and until they really decide to do anything with the road, there isn't much we can really do. But if and when they decide to repave, change design, that's when we can start pushing for things like sidewalks and bike and ped lanes, and it's more in their criteria at this point in terms of how they're redesigning roads. But until that happens, I think that's going to be a hard thing to implement. Especially
with the bike path being an alternate route now.
Correct. Correct.
But I've heard people talk about Easthampton taking possession of Route 10 from College Highway to the Southampton town line.
I haven't heard anything in terms of that, but again, I've been here 6 months, so
okay.
That could be something worth researching for the committee.
Agreed.
The Transportation Committee, there's been no action on that. Nonotuck Park Management Plan, I don't think they have an up-to-date management plan because I asked for one recently and I'm not sure if they have one, but that would be a good question for John Mason at Parks and Rec. Infill housing in downtown areas, I think this is something that's sort of an ongoing, once there's properties that come up for sale like the Landry building, then it's worth having discussions to promote housing and affordable housing. Yes.
I need a definition.
For what?
Infill.
Infill. Infill housing is if you have, so you've got 6 houses here and you've got either a vacant building or a vacant lot in the middle. It's putting housing on that vacant lot or within that vacant building.
That's surrounded by other.
That's surrounded by other things. So it's not a green. A green field is a field that's completely green. Nobody's touched it. It's or nobody touched it in a relative history term. But
in here, when they were talking about infill housing, they're referring to the goal of succeeding in creating more of that or filling in more of that. Is that
right? It's working with the developers to actually create the housing. So I think the Landry building is a good example. When that goes up for sale, there has been some interest by some folks who are interested in purchasing it to turn it into housing. So that would be, again, just sort of, you can't force people to do things when they're in the purchase, but it's worth having the discussions to let them know that there are other options. The pool at Whitebrook, this was a big item that was talked a lot, I felt like, at the master plan meetings, and I don't know what the story is with it, but it was
Can I ask why?
Lots of people love that pool. My kids learned to swim at that pool. When it went down, it affected the whole community. It's one of those things which you might think would take a back seat to many other issues, but it affected
It jumped out
everyone.
at me right away, and having only lived here for 3 years, I was kind of like, cool.
Last I heard, there was movement on it, this was a while ago, something about a heater being replaced, and then something about this roof or ceiling that they had to do some work on. But I can't find out more.
I don't know the history, I'm sure.
Maybe in
Others
the
do.
next stage, one of the things I'm hoping we can talk about is how these things, how certain things float to the top and how
Correct.
Yeah.
to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Definitely going to get
I think you need to basically take this list of 25 and pick no more than, say, 4 to 5 things that you want to work on in a year. And things take time to get to process. So you got to bite it off in chunks and figure out what's the most realistic to move forward on. Where's their momentum? Where's their energy? Where do you have champions? So it's going to be understanding sort of the political landscape of what's happening, where things are happening, where there's funding available. These are all things that play into setting that priority list. So. All right, sorry, last couple ones here, we'll try to blast through it. The conservation site analysis, that's something that's used primarily for our open space residential development or cluster subdivisions. At this point, it's not being used in any other fashion. The hours at the transfer station, it's worth a discussion, but I'm not sure how implementable this would be under the current budget climate. So, it has to do with having staff at the transfer station and whether that's something that can be afforded right now. Expanding the neighborhood business zones in Franklin Street and Plains, that's been no action. Zoning review for affordable housing has not happened, but could happen under this housing plan. And the local food on the APR, there's been no action on this as far as I know. I also think it may be hard to implement, but
We don't have a lot of land designated that way, right?
we have quite a bit.
Agricultural.
We actually have a new property that's coming for agricultural preservation restriction. But it's a state-run program. It has to be kept in an agricultural use. A lot of landowners tend to just hay it because it's the easiest thing to do. The negotiation doesn't really necessarily happen at the local level. The negotiation is happening between the state and the landowners. So I don't know how we insert ourselves into the process to say, this is something we'd like to see happening. We're being notified by the state saying, hey, we're going to pay money to take this into this restriction program. So, in any event, sorry for the long and lengthy, but
There's a lot of good information there.
it's a starting point.
Do you have anything else?
No, I just want to say, again, use me as a resource, and if I don't know the answers, I'll figure out how to get people in. I did want to ask, though, did everybody get voted in by Barbara? Are you going to talk about that?
Yes, and it really should have been in C. I skipped it. You're absolutely right. Thank you for putting that. In order to officially be on this committee, you've been voted in by the planning board, but during regular office hours, you're going to have to go upstairs to the secretary, Shannon book, or whatever the pamphlet is, and swear yourself in.
If you're not on another committee. If you've already been sworn in, you're okay.
You're
So
okay,
did you
yeah.
get sworn in for
Highway
houses?
business, yeah.
Yes.
And you two are all set?
Okay.
If,
And they've come through too with the new, they weren't doing it for a little while, but there's an ethics test on the website, and they weren't doing it because they were revising the test, but it's come out again since, and you have to take the little ethics test on the webpage. It's very easy. So please do that. I think the next step for us as a group is going to be exactly what you said. We have to pick some manageable tasks that we want to start with. Now, what I'd like to see is, I'm going to set a little homework assignment. I was hoping we might have a few more people here so that I could maybe go a little higher, but I'm just going to keep it low, just pick 3 things on this list. And I love the weighted method of decision making. I've used it in a lot of committees, and I'm going to use that here. Everyone has a homework assignment of taking the 3 things on this list that they would love to run with, that they think are the things we should focus first. When next we meet, we're going to put those 3 things together. We're going to weight them, as we did before, as in a similar system to what you mentioned, and we're going to come out with, from that group, some things we can start with, right off the top. Initially, I'd like to start with some basic discussions. I want to get the ball rolling. I want to get people sent out to make inquiries, find out what's going on. Eventually, I'd like to get to the point where we're delegating little mini committees within the group. Finding out based on where our strengths in and who we know, what we might be able to accomplish and how far we can go. That said, it should tell you right off that I'm hoping we'll have a lot more than 3 things that we accomplish. I just want to break this into chunks. Is there anyone here that has a different opinion of approach?
I do. But why don't you go first?
Well, I was just thinking, I like that, but I feel like we also want to get a little more information about feasibility, because I feel like I can't make any informed decisions about my top 3 if I don't have, and I realize there's like a balance between, we can't spend all the time really with an in-depth analysis of how feasible these things are, but I feel like a little more background knowledge would be helpful in me doing the weighted, like giving my top 3 choices.
Okay.
I guess a little more than the snippet.
Okay.
I mean, I could be talked out of that, but
I don't think it's an invalid opinion at all. I mean, more information is always helpful.
I mean, we could also talk about right away what we like and then get more information on the ones that are, you know, that maybe we're all going to agree on the top 3. I don't know. So, anyway, those are just...
I'm interested. I've been working an awful lot with this weighted system, the dots specifically. I've done it at least a dozen times in the past 9 months. And yeah,
It is a lot.
Yeah.
I think the last time I did it was at this project.
The first time I did it was on the master plan, but it's become very popular. And I don't have all the answers, but I've made some observations, and one of the things I wish we could do is address the attack on that in a way that takes into consideration, I'll make up a quick example. You can have something that's the highest priority because, for example, it's our groundwater, and if our groundwater is polluted, we all get sick, and there are no more meetings, we're ill, and we're not here. So there's a real simple justification for why that has to be your number 1 priority. Meantime, there's a thing over here that is a low priority. It's not even important by anyone's definition, but it's quick and easy. Now, is there possibly a way to implement or to benefit from including things that are not necessarily more important than the other thing? The method that we use tends to say this thing is more important than the other thing. But since our job is implementation, maybe it isn't always simply a matter of importance, which is what I was thinking about when the White Brook swimming pool came up. That's how that ended up. That's exactly how it ended up so high, was this methodology. And so I wonder if we couldn't maybe improve on what is no doubt a good start, but by trying to factor in things like, one of them is how important it is, like the water. The other is maybe how quickly or easily it might be implemented. And one other idea I had that might help us is if we set out our tasks, if we make public some of these objectives, and this is, remember, just working off the top 25 at the front. The book is full of a lot more, and they're not mutually exclusive. It's just that we have limited resources and time, so what we choose to spend our time on may be one thing. But I suspect that if we were good at what we're doing, we might be able to put it out there. Imagine a big billboard that says, these are all things that are approved and we're looking to have happen. There may be others that come, swoop in, and take care of something that we never even have to deal with it, but it gets checked off of our list. And I suspect that there's a real benefit to having that kind of, if people see like, wow, things are happening, this is a group that gets stuff done, then I think there's that sort of magic effect of the big ball that gets rolling and people want to join on that bandwagon. And so some of the things that are definitely not going to be in our top 3, like let's say, I don't know, I'm making up when I remember the parade, a historic town parade. Like somebody might just take that and run with it, and we could just check it off the list and say, yeah, that got done, without us ever having to say, this is my top 3 priorities. So a little bit, I think what I'm pushing for is if we could think about ways we might be able to improve on our weighting of the system so that we don't necessarily discard things that, at that rate it would be 25 years before we would get to some of these obviously low priority things. But they might be more easily attainable if we can come up with a little more refined method.
I love the idea of stratifying by time and what's accomplishable as well. I think you're right to point that out. There's a fine line because we need more information to be able to make a good decision. We have to start with some things to work on, and we don't want to forget things that could be easily checked off. So how to balance it? I'd still like you to come back with 3 main things, but how about each person tries to pick 2 things in the list too that you think could be easily accomplished. And listen, that doesn't solve the goal. I understand the point you're trying to make. It goes beyond that. We need to think big picture. I intend to do that. We, I'm sure, as a group intend to do that, but we just don't have the information yet as individuals. Some of us weren't involved in the making of the plan. We need more time as a group to hear the group talk about it, to be a part of it before we can really start to fully digest and encompass all the materials. So let's let that happen organically for a few meetings. Are you okay with that?
I am. I'm mostly promoting the idea that I think we should just always be looking for ways that we're successfully multitasking or managing to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, pardon the...
Now, this doesn't help with where we're going to get additional information to pick these things. I think the only way we can do that is by working together to answer questions, being available. If anyone wants my phone number, I'm going to email this group. If anyone else wants to share a number, it's up to you if you want to, communicate. The thing is, we can't talk about anything open meeting law. I haven't said anything about that, and I probably should. Open meeting law limits what we can do because these are public meetings. They're announced and advanced, and people have the right to hear what we're talking about. So if we're talking about decisions, we can't do that except when we're here. We can't make decisions when we're off-site. So what you say in your email, you have to be very cautious about. You can say, I investigated something and this is what I found out, but you can't give your opinion on it. So keep opinions out of your emails. This is what I think of something. That shouldn't be in an email that we exchange to each other. You save that for the meeting. So put factual information. So if someone has a question, look, I don't understand 40R, totally call Jessica. Call me, or definitely don't call me, call Jessica in this case. I went to her class on it. And you can get information, straight information on a particular topic. But be careful not to discuss these things in a way that is lending your opinion out in public. It's inappropriate to mass meeting law, open meeting law. I'm getting tired. I can hear it in my voice. It's been a long day. 3 top things from each of you. Bring them to the next meeting, okay? And 2 things that you think are in this list that you think are things we can check off reasonably easy.
The top 25 list.
Out of the top 25 list.
So our homework assignment only opening the...
Just start with beginning of the book.
I may respectfully disagree a little bit. I think it's worth looking at the bigger list so that you can get a sense. And I agree with John that it makes sense to try to do things that are easily implementable. The president always has that 100-day thing. But I just want to caution that I've worked with other implementation committees that have struggled because they had no focus on exactly what they were working on, and it just derailed them. So I think it's important to sort of at least set, even if the list is 10 things and you want to make them some easy, some hard, I think you should have at least some bullet list of what you would want to work on in a given year. And things can carry over from year to year. Things are going to take time, especially zoning amendments. I mean, it's going to take 6 months to draft, 3 months to get through all the hearings and committees and city council and all of that stuff. It could take up to a year to get a zoning bylaw changed.
Very long view of these things.
So, I just want you to, I don't want people to get frustrated because things aren't happening quickly. I think you need to be cautious that TTT, things take time, especially in government. So I just want to say, try to have a list. I think it'd be, but you should run this the way that you believe is going to be the most manageable, and I leave that to you to sort of figure that out.
This is just meeting 1, starting baby steps.
Yeah, no.
And we can add 3 more things and 2 more meetings, and I want it to grow to encompass those things, so please don't think. I know it seems like, well, that's a ridiculously small amount. I'm very much getting that.
Yeah.
It won't.
No.
We'll grow it.
And this is a committee that's going to be standing for a while. There's no time limit on this committee. It's not like you're here for 2 years and then that's it. It's going to. My hope is that it's a committee that ends up being a standing committee. We're not asking you to stay here for 20 years, but it's in my hope it's a committee that could be here for at least 10 years trying to move this plan forward. So I just want
people
I'm going to grow up to be one of those old obstructionist guys. I can't wait. Listen, I think she made a really good point. I'm sorry, I'll give you a chance to go in a second. The reason I said just the top 25 is because I wanted to give you something to focus on, especially you and me really who weren't here and part of the process. It gives us a very narrow focus where we can really try to study it. But you're absolutely right that everything in here is fair game for what you put on your top 3.
I just had a question to clarify the role of the committee members in terms of expectations around how much time we might, the first couple meetings, probably go home, do a couple things, think about a couple things, but like in a year, might this take like more of my free time that I think some of us feel like is not that free? I mean,
it's a good question.
I feel like I hope that it might, but I also feel like I hope that it might not take up like a lot of my time. So I would like, anyway. Just
the balance. For everyone that's involved in city committees, that's a balance. My hope in how this works is that you put in what you feel comfortable with. If that ever gets to a point where it's not enough, most likely with people who reach that, they let us know. It's not the other way around. Okay. My hope that of what we'll get out of every person in this room is that they'll share and they'll offer something that helps us in communication and dialogue that builds a better team, and they'll pick probably 1, maybe 2 things that they feel passionate about and put a little extra in on that. Maybe contact people on the side, help get a ball rolling. That's it.
It might also ebb and flow as well, depending on what it is. I mean, if you, again, I'm going back to a zoning ordinance, but if it's zoning, you might be meeting, once a month to do drafting, but then once you get into the public hearing stage, you might be meeting more frequently because there's changes and amendments, and so I think it's going to depend on what you're trying to implement, who you're trying to work with, and how frequently they're meeting and they're accessible, and so it may ebb and flow. You might have a series of months where it's only meeting once in a month, but then if something's really sort of coming to a point where it's hoping to get implemented, you might start meeting every 2 weeks. It's totally up to the committee to decide on how much they want to spend working on this.
And I'll try to make it fun.
There's no set time. It's however much you feel like you can handle. This is a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
5 years have gone by, but it's really a 20-year plan. So.
Does anyone have any questions at this point about the plan, or anything more that they'd like to add to the set of tasks that I've assigned?
I have one more question. Am I the question girl?
No.
The most interesting thing about 5 years later, it's kind of like, why now?
It was I don't know. I would have to say I think there was.
I know.
Would you like to answer, Jason?
I'll try to answer that question. Yeah. We had, when adoption time came around, I know that they were bringing it, or there was discussion of bringing it to the council as well. And
it has been adopted by the council.
That's what I had understood. And then I know Stuart, the previous planner, and I had talked about forming an implementation committee back in like 2009 probably, and it just never really got off the ground, and it just kept being one of those things that kept coming up, and that's why things just got stalled. Essentially,
New city planner, new energy, new spark, new drive.
There was also just it was finished in 2008. I don't think it was officially adopted by City Council until 2010. There was some issues regarding specifically the Chapter 40R Smart Growth District, and so there was some hesitation for some council members to adopt the master plan because of the 40R strategy alone as being in there.
Yeah, there were some underlying
There was some underlying issues that happened.
There was a discussion of, well, can we adopt just this much of the master plan and not adopt that?
Just so you understand the
political
dynamics.
Yes.
Yep. Any other questions? I'd like to entertain if anyone wants to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second the motion.
I'm going to ask for discussion, and I'm going to add this in my own discussion to this motion, which is totally inappropriate. I forgot that before adjournment comes me setting next meeting time, which I didn't do. What do you think about twice a month for now? And if we start to get into a rhythm, we could slow it down to once a month, or maybe keep it up, depending on how the committee feels. This time, tonight, 2 weeks. Is that going to work for folk?
I'm wondering if a half an hour
earlier or later?
Later.
So
That works for me. Earlier wouldn't work.
That would work better for me as well.
6:30?
A little later, yeah.
Is there anyone here for whom 6:30 is a problem? So let it be noted, we will meet from 6:30 to 7:30, 2 weeks from today. Okay, now we had a motion in place. There was someone made a motion and someone had a second.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against? Thank you very much for our first
you,
MPIC
gentlemen.
meeting.
So we call ourselves NPIC?
I took that liberty.
Call yourselves anything you like.